So now the attention and the initiative and the leadership is shifting to the grassroots. There are students who are working on the divestment campaign. They're succeeding in getting colleges and universities to divest from fossil fuel companies. There's indigenous folks all over the world, and particularly we saw an uprising in 2012, 2013 of Idle No More. There are
actually, Sarah, we want to go to Idle No More. This month, Foreign Policy magazine named the 4 founders of Idle No More: Jessica Gordon, Sylvia McAdams, Sheila McLean, and Nina Wilson, among its list of the 100 leading global thinkers of 2013. They were commended for demanding that Canada not leave its First Nations behind. One of the movement's most high-profile supporters is Chief Teresa Spence, who went on a weeks-long hunger strike in a teepee just outside Ottawa's Parliament at the end of 2012. She warned she would starve herself until she gets a meeting with Prime Minister Harper to discuss respect for historical treaties.
We're living in the third world, and this shouldn't be happening in this country. You know, they're getting rich by our land. Everybody's using our traditional land except us and all these mining companies and other forestries and other things that's been happening in our community. There's no benefit for us. It's all going to the government.
Sarah Van Gelder, you interviewed the 4 women who founded Idle No More in the piece you wrote, Why Canada's Indigenous Uprising is About All of Us. Talk about their work and what's happened this year since Chief Spence's hunger strike.
Well, what's extraordinary is that Prime Minister Harper thought he could sort of push through this major new fossil fuel extraction enterprise across Canada, just rolling over all the First Nations people and everyone else who has concerns about the air and water quality through his legislation C-45. And he found out that he actually couldn't do that quite that way. And one of the reasons he couldn't is because, again, across Canada, First Nations groups formed local versions of Idle No More. Idle No More is very much of a grassroots effort. These women were not major Indigenous leaders. They were not people who were on the front page. They were people who were active in their own communities, but they came together and said, we cannot acquiesce to this sort of pillage of our lands anymore, and we will be idle no more. And that inspired people across Canada, and then in the United States and elsewhere around the world. They did flash mob round dances where they basically do a occupation of intersections and public spaces. They had the fast that you mentioned. There have been blockades in places where there are efforts to get fracking going. There's one going on right now in New Brunswick. So I think what we're seeing is that that a lot of the initiative now on the climate question is coming down to each local area. We have some of this going on in the Pacific Northwest as well, where extreme oil and extreme energy is causing all sorts of local damage. I mean, the train wreck in North Dakota is an example of this going on right now also. People are standing up for their rights to have a clean environment where they are, but they're also aware that this is very much linked to the climate crisis globally.
Sarah Van Gelder, we're speaking to you in Seattle. In your wrap-up of the hopeful things that happened in 2013, you write about the beginning of an education uprising. We covered parts of these developments in May when teachers, students, and parents in Seattle won their campaign to reject standardized tests in reading and math. Their protests began in January when teachers at Garfield High began a boycott of the test, saying it was wasteful and being used unfairly to assess their performance. I spoke with Jessie Hagapian, a high school history teacher and union rep at Garfield High School, just after their victory.
We were celebrating the fact that our students will no longer have to sit in front of the dull glow of a computer screen looking at questions that they were never prepared for because the test was not aligned to the state-mandated curriculum. And we were celebrating because our English language learners will no longer have to be humiliated by a test that is linguistically and culturally inappropriate for them. Our special ed students will no longer have to take a test where their IEPs or individual education plans are not respected. And you know, we were celebrating, I think, too, because Washington State ranks #1 in the nation in high stakes testing, and we spend over $100 million a year on these tests, and Garfield High School teachers and teachers around Seattle who have joined the boycott of the MAP test have said that we would rather spend that $100 million on reading coaches and on tutoring programs, things that can actually help elevate our students and get them where we know they need to be.
Jesse Hagapian, high school history teacher and union representative at Garfield High School. Sarah.
Yeah, we're actually, our next issue of Yes Magazine is going to be on education, and we're going to be telling that story from Garfield High School in some depth, partly because it's an exciting example of something that happened in 2013, but also because we think this is going to be spreading. What we've seen around the country is austerity, which cuts back on the budgets of schools, including ones that are really struggling. The whole race to the top, which is a successor to No Child Left Behind, which is basically using high-stakes testing to punish schools that are struggling with, especially with students that are coming right out of poverty. This sort of punitive attitude towards teachers or students who are having a hard time, instead of supporting them and succeeding, we're seeing this kind of punitive approach. And what we're doing in this next issue of Yes is looking at what it will take to actually get these schools to succeed, and what it will take to get this movement to spread, so that instead of punishing our schools, we're supporting them and we're preparing students for the kind of a world that they're going to be inheriting, not the kind of world that will just slot them into low-wage jobs.
The LGBT movement won a historic victory in June when the Supreme Court struck down the Defense of Marriage Act and paved the way for same-sex marriages to resume in California. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled the 1996 DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, signed by President Clinton, was unconstitutional. This means that legally married same-sex couples entitled to claim the same 1,100 federal benefits as heterosexual couples. The lead plaintiff in the case, 84-year-old Edith Windsor, hailed the ruling.
I'm honored and humbled and overjoyed to be here today to represent not only the thousands of Americans whose lives have been adversely impacted by the